Well, I had a few emails, and a couple of them asked how I actually did the crater when I did my exploding text. So if you look at the exploding text video on my channel, you'll see what they mean. It's quite simple, but I'll quickly go through it. So first of all, I'll make something explode. Now, the easiest thing to use is probably, that's going to look reasonably good, is probably an icosphere, so I'll get rid of that by pressing X, and we will add in an icosphere, and I want it to have a fair amount of subdivisions. And then all we do is, from quick effects, we go quick explode, strangely enough. And as you'll see, that has put an explode modifier in, it's put a particle system in, and basically I'm going to leave this completely alone, except I'm going to get rid of explode fade. I don't really ever use that. If I want particles to disappear, I can do it with the particle system, but I hardly ever do. Now, how many pieces do we want to break this down into? Maybe 200. Sounds like a good number. Whoops, not 20. I have 200. And we're going to have the explosion start. We're not going to have it start on frame 1. We're going to actually have it start later. We're going to have a second before it actually starts. Otherwise it looks a bit silly, I've always found. So we're going to have it start on, say, frame 24, end on frame 25. Lifetime of the particles is going to be lifetime of the actual animation, and I'm going to stick to the standard 250 long here. The rest of this seems okay, except the velocity will probably need tweaking, so let's see what it actually does. And I've got a feeling that all that's going to happen is it's going to whiz out and disappear down onto the ground, which isn't going to be, yeah, it's not going to be too good, is it? Never fear. First thing to do is to give everything some Z or upwards velocity, and I'm going to give it about 5 or something like that, and we'll go back and we'll see what happens then. As you can see, now things leap up in the air a bit. The next thing to do is to reduce the power of gravity, because that always looks better with these explosions. I don't know why. So we'll take that down to 0.2, something like that, and we'll add a little bit of random speed in there, maybe a 2 on that. You can see it's starting to look a bit better already. Yeah, that looks quite good actually. I think in actual fact it wants to slow down a bit, so we'll make this 3, and normal's probably about right. Yeah, look at that. Actually, I'm going to make that 4. Right, so that's our exploding thingy, and now we want something to actually, for these particles to actually hit and to make a crater in. Okay, so surprise surprise, I'm going to add a plane. Add. Plane. And we're going to scale that up, and you can make your plane however big the heck you want. I'm making my plane that size, and I'm going to drop it down a bit because I want this object to be sitting on it when it explodes. There we go, something like that. And it's no use to us just having a flat plane because we want to make craters in it, and to do that we need a lot more vertices than is actually on this plane. So let's add some. So we go into object mode, go to edit, and we've got subdivide, so we'll click subdivide a few times to add some detail. Okay, and you can leave it flat like this, or you can use the sculpt tools or any other tool to make it into a terrain. So if I quickly go into sculpt mode, I'll show you what I mean. Best thing to use probably clay strips, and we'll reduce the size of our. Oops, not reduce it that much. You can never find a happy medium with this thing. And we want to go, and we want to enable dynamic topology, and let's go. Actually, we do want it bigger now. Go in here. We're going to make that. Okay. So you can now see something starting to happen. We've made a lump. Okay. It's always better if you've got lumps and bumps in something, because it looks more realistic, doesn't it? You know. Let's just make a few bangs, make a few banks and hills and valleys and things. And there we go. Now if I go into the camera view, you'll see there it is, and I'm going to move it because I want it to fill the camera, so we'll go back into object mode again, and we'll move the plane until it does a better job of filling the camera view. And maybe I'll scale it up. How's that? That'll do. Something like that. Which now means we need to move our object up, because actually we've got a hill on which our object is sitting, and that's going to be quite a nice effect. I want to move that off centre a bit anyway. Right, so that hill there, little hill, is going to turn into a crater. And we'll just set the shading to smooth on that. Set the shading to smooth on that. Now, what shall I make the material for this? Just a chrome ball thing. So, at the moment we've got explode fade in there as a texture, but we want to get rid of that. And we're going to have a new material, and we'll leave everything to defaults apart from the fact that we're going to add in a mirror. And we're going to make it very mirror-y but a bit blue. That'll kind of look like chrome, like that. Okay. Now we'll add a material onto here, and this is going to be a sand material, and I've got a nice texture I can use for that. So I'll go to my images, and in my 3D directory I've got one surprisingly called sand, which will do a good job. There you go, that'll do. So it's already affecting the colour. I'm going to make it affect the normal a bit as well. Maybe 0.2 or 0.3. Quick trial render. There you go. Don't like the scale of it though, it's looking a bit too big. So we'll that's a bit better. Now we'll sort out the lighting. See, I like to get all this stuff done first and out of the way before we get on to the meat of making things happen. It's amazing how often when you do this you'll actually end up changing your mind. Where are we at the moment? we're up there, we've got a point, don't want a point. I often prefer to use spotlights instead of the sun, and it's in sort of a good position. We'll raise it up a bit, move it over a bit. What's it like from the top? So we want to rotate it around a bit so it's pointing in a more at our object. It's always better to do that. Energy, I'm going to boost that up a bit and make it about a 4. Distance, 50 maybe. And increase the soft size on the shadows up to maybe 2. Samples up to 4. And what this does is it gives you softer shadows basically. We'll render that and see what that looks like. There you go, you can see you've got a soft shadow around there. The hills are showing up and the dips are showing up, which is what we want to do. And I'm going to make the background of the world a dark colour. I'm going to turn this energy up because of that. I'm going to turn it up to maybe 8. Make it go a little bit yellow, so it's more like a sun. And our world here, we're going to have everything go absolute black. See what that looks like. Yeah, that's kind of okay. It'll do because we're not going for any sort of prize here. So that's that. So we'll go back to our 3D view. And now for what we were asked to do. And we were asked to do a crater. I'm going to show you how this works. Okay. Now here's how it works. We're going to use a feature on Blender that's called shape keys, and if we go into this triangular thing here, which is data, you'll see you've got a blank thing there called shape keys, and if we hit plus once we get something called basis, and what that is it's storing what this is. Okay, and then we're going to modify it, and we're going to modify it to add this crater. And so what we need to do is add another, it'll say key 1, then you can rename it if you want. We'll call it crater, say. And then what we're going to do is going to sculpt again. And no, I'm not actually. I'm not going to go into sculpt. I forgot. I did try this before and sculpt doesn't work. So we need to go into edit mode. There we go. We're going to turn proportional editing on. We're going to make it a sphere, and then we're going to deselect all the vertices, and we're just going to select the ones, if I view top here, we're just going to select the ones around the ball, just immediately around the ball. So if I hit C on the keyboard, which is circle select, and go boom, like that. That's just selected those vertices. Okay. So now hit escape to get rid of our select, hit the arrows so that we've got something to do, and you'll see now that when we try and move it we get this little circle in the middle, and by rotating the mouse wheel I can make that bigger or smaller. So and I'm going to move it down. And as you can see, it's taking a section with it. And then I'm going to move it down even further, but I'm going to bring that out like so. Okay, so that's the start of the crater. And now we want it quite a lot deeper, say in the middle, so we'll just pick one vertex, which happens to be, and that one does look like it's in the middle. So there we go. We'll click on that, and this time we're going to reduce the size of our circle, so we've got an extra wide, an extra deep section, as a lot of craters do. So there you have a crater. Okay. And what I want to do is I want to make it affect this hill as well, which will make it even more obvious. So we'll click on that. And make it there. So it's just going to affect that hill just a little bit. Okay. So right, so that's what we've done. Now we go back into object mode. As you can see, our crater's disappeared. Why is that? Well, because its value is at 0. If I move the value up, boom, you can see the crater coming in. Let's have a quick look and see what the crater renders like. That's pretty good. So that's the start of our crater. And why do I say it's the start? Well, you really want everything to change colour. Okay, so with this at 1, which is the absolute maximum it will go to, if we go back into select, make sure that's selected, we'll go back into edit mode, and let's pick the area that we want to, we're going to pick an area that we want to be discoloured. Okay. So we're going to go C again for circle. I'm going to pick an area. So it would be an area like that. But also I think you're going to have some unevenness here. So we're going to go like that. Go like that. Go like that. And that will be, if you like, our discoloured area. And the way we're going to do this is actually quite cunning. And what we're going to do, if I hit escape to get rid of my circle select tool, what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate these vertices. So if we go down to mesh, you'll see down here you've got add duplicate, bang, like that. You can see now you've got a duplicate of that mesh, but we want it to be in the same place, so I'm going to hit escape. Right. And now what we want to do is, sorry, we don't want it to be in the same place, we want it to be somewhere else. Control Z. What we want to do is we want to hit A for all, and we want to hit P, and we're going to separate it by loose parts. So we've now got two objects. One object is our original plane, the other object is our mesh that we just created. Let's make sure we've only got that selected. And there it is. And now what we're going to do is we're going to change the material on just that object. So we're going to delete that material slot, we're going to add a new one. It's going to be dark-ish, maybe a bit towards the brown side. No specular intensity. but we're going to make it transparent. Somewhere around about 0.5, 0.6, and what this will do is it will actually hang it over the top of the creator material. So if I now move that up so that it comes just about over the top of the creator material, like that, and we'll render it, and you'll see what we've got. We've got this dark shape that suddenly appeared. Okay, and if we turn the alpha down until it looks right, oops, turn the specular down as well. And what's happening here is the shadow is magnifying the effect. So I'm having to turn everything right the way down. Aha! I seem to remember this as well. Now when this happens, you get black underneath it. You need to make sure you've got receive transparent selected on the front, on the actual ground. That's more what I was sort of expecting. Right, so now we'll go back to our transparent plane, and we'll turn things back up again. There we go, that's better. So now you've got a dark area. It's a bit too dark again. And you can monkey about and create different shapes and different sort of like burn marks, but that will do. Okay. Now we had our that will appear automatically as soon as that is at 1. That will automatically appear, and it won't appear until then. And the reason for that is obviously the ground will be a lot flatter over there. In fact, there's a hill there. So let's go back into where it says crater here, and we want to do that for our friend here. That's it. Okay. So now what we need to do is we need to animate it so the crater appears when the object explodes. And do you remember I said, well, I think it was 25. Yeah, it's at 25 it explodes. So we want the crater to appear probably around about, finish appearing at probably around about 30, and start appearing at 24, something like that. Okay, so at 24 we'll hover our mouse over there, hit the I key, and you can see it's changed to yellow, which means a keyframe has been added for it. And then we're going to go along until we get to about, say there. We're going to drag that all the way up to 1, and there we go. So that's what we'll look like part the way through the explosion. Now obviously I haven't added any smoke or coloured light to make it look like things are burning. If you want to ask me to do that, that's fine. Then I can do that as another tutorial. So now I'm just going to render that, and I'm just going to render it as a video. Let's just come down here, set up to X video, and bung it on my desktop. Give it a bit of a file name. Turn up the anti-aliasing. This is okay, that's okay. Right, so now I'm going to render the animation, and I'll pause it while that actually happens, and you can then see it. And just to show I'm still human, I just realised I've made a bit of a whoopsie. What I've forgotten to do is set up this plane as an obstacle that the fragments can collide with. So I'm going to stop the render, and we'll do that again in a minute. So, plane selected, and we'll go to the physics tab. Going to set it up as a collision. Okay, now what we're going to do, because we don't want stuff bouncing around and messing about, so we're going to kill the particles as soon as they hit it, and that means that we have to go back into the particle system of our icosphere, and we need to make sure that it's going to render dead particles. There we go. And what that means is it will just go whack straight into the sand and stay put. No bouncing, no moving around, no nothing. And the other thing I'm going to do, I think, because I kind of forgot to do it, I'm going to add a bit of thickness onto that ball, because those particles look a bit silly. The fragments look a bit silly rather. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a solidify modifier. I'm going to make sure it goes above the explode and then apply it. So I'll go hit add modifier, solidify. I'm going to move it above everything. I'm going to make it rather thicker. 0.3 or something maybe. So I've got some nice chunky pieces. Going to apply it. And now hopefully the bits will be, yeah, you can see the bits have got chunks. And the other thing that would be nice is if they rotated as well. See, I'm making this more complicated because every time I do this I'm seeing something else that needs doing, and this is typical of working with Blender, to be honest. This is the sort of thing you'll find yourself doing a lot of. So we're going to go back into the particle system. We're going to allow things to rotate. They're going to be dynamic rotation. It's going to be a bit of random. Going to be some velocity in there. Phasing is going to be random a little bit, maybe. And that will do. So if we have a look and see what that looks like before rendering, might be a good idea, I guess. So we're waiting around, things go bang, they go up, they drop around, and they're falling through the substrate. Well, actually they're not, they're getting killed off, but they're sort of somehow staying inside the substrate. I don't get this. What's going on here? Because we should be rendering yeah. Explode modifier, that's what it is. I'm missing that. In the explode modifier you've got to make sure they're rendered when they're dead. So there you go. and now you've got bits all over, and perhaps we want a few more bits because I don't think there's quite enough bits. Let's turn the number of bits up a bit. And our explosion is perhaps a little too enthusiastic. Maybe not. What do you think? You can set yours up however the heck you like, but I'm going to turn that down a bit. I'm going to turn that down a bit. I'm going to turn that down a bit. And let's have a look, see, and see how it is now. Quite like the way that is rammed into the ground there. That's quite a good effect, isn't it? Except it's not. Okay, it's floating there because the crater has dropped before that piece has exploded. Okay, I didn't have this problem the last time. Why not? Oh, I know why not. Okay. I've got quite a long time between the explosion and the explosion's a fast explosion, so let's slow this down a bit. Let's make it occur between frame 24 and 30 and we'll see what happens. Okay. Let's animate that ball to drop down as the crater's formed. So, there we are, crater forms. Right, let's go into animate, insert location. There. Insert location. Now what happens? That looks better. The bits are now at least inside the crater. Although we seem to have left some bits behind, probably because they touch this surface. Turn this up a bit more. That's better. We need to turn it up and we need to delay that dropping down. So we need to remove the key. Hang on a minute. No, we don't. Because if I do that, I need to remove that keyframe. Go back down. We need to come into about there. Insert a location keyframe there. And we'll get rid of the original one, because otherwise we would have lost that position, you see. Then we'll drop it down so it hits there. Now what happens? Well, that's better, but it looks a bit bogus because the drop is too fast. What it is you can actually see the drop. So I'm going to remove that keyframe that I just put in. I'm going to go a bit further along. And then insert location. Right. Now how are we doing? That's better. Still got some orphan pieces that aren't doing anything. Right, I'm going to have to do this a somewhat different way then. Instead of using the dead, let's get rid of those. I'm actually going to have to use the proper collision system. I managed to wangle it so I didn't do it the last time, but hey, these things happen. So what was I going to do? I was going to turn off rendering dead particles. Where are we? There. Right, so I'm turning off rendering dead particles, and we go back to the plane, adjust our physics. Instead of killing the particles, I'm going to damp the hell out of them. And we're going to add loads and loads of friction. And the thing is, you can see they're still thrashing around. I mean, really, you shouldn't do that, because we've got full friction. I want a bit of random in there, really. How about the stickiness? What happens if we turn stickiness up? Get all sorts of weird things happening on that. They're still sailing about. So what I'm going to have to do probably is turn them all off at random times and continue to. So I'm going to have to put back those die. Isn't it wonderful? They all jump up and down now. Oh dear God, I didn't want that to happen. Anyway, so find our particle system. Turn back on the dyeing. And we'll give them a lifetime of, say, 80. Random 0.4, no, a bit longer than that. And we need to go back to here, and we want to render the dead ones. Right, now what can we do? You can see 80 is not, that isn't long enough, so we need to turn that up. Turn that down. Still not long enough. Turn that up as well. I'm going to turn the other up. See, what we want is no particles dying when they're in mid-air, but all of them die on the ground. Best to do from camera view, I guess. So if something dies in mid-air up there, it doesn't really matter, does it? Look at that, like it just did. And honestly, that was not planned. Right. Now what we want to do, so not very realistic, probably because of the stickiness thing. Particle damping wants to go up. That's better. Okay, I'm going to render that. That would be reasonable. It gives you some idea of some of the playing around that you have to do. Right, I've rendered the first 100 frames or so, and let's just show you what we've got. So there we go. We have the ball exploding, we have the bits coming out. Now of course, if you were to do this as a proper explosion, you would want to do some other things as well. You would want all of the dirt and bits of rock to fly out of the hole when it's made. You would want to make this plane more detailed so that you could make this dark area more detailed. You would want to add in some smoke, and you would want to add a point source light somewhere in the middle here to give you the glare from the explosion, and the dull red glow of things burning, perhaps. Very often it's also a good idea to add in some handmade pieces of debris that just hurtle straight towards the camera.